everybody. Welcome to the inaugural Cats and Bolts podcast being recorded at the Podcast Junkies studio in downtown Boca Raton, Florida. This is a podcast that's going to be talking about the NHL and the two teams specifically here in Florida, the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. As you can tell, the Cats and Bolts podcast. I'm Rod Peterson. The co-host is Sarina Taylor. We are a couple of Canadians living now in Florida, Floridians that love the NHL, and we love hockey, Sarina. So what should people know about this podcast since it's the very first one?
Well, I think the most important thing that we need to stress to everybody is that this is what we do now. We get people to know everything about hockey in Florida. So the real reason that this podcast came about was because we realized there was a lot of people in Florida that don't have access to a lot of hockey. Growing up in Canada, we're so used to there being hockey all over the place. And here there's not really. So for a while, we've been trying to put our heads together, like, how do we get these people this information? Because there are a lot of hockey fans here. Let's get them the raw and the real information that we're looking for.
There you go. And I broadcast hockey for 20 years in Canada, major junior hockey. Sarina is the Canada's first ever female play-by-play broadcaster, so she seems to think she knows a little bit about hockey.
She does. She knows a little bit. A little bit.
You like that one back there? All right. Hey, Ben's actually listening. Where's my bell? I got 5 burning questions about the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers. And by the way, I do host a television show daily on Game Plus Television across Canada. I've got people stopping me at Panthers games going, you need to talk more Panthers. You need to talk more Panthers. And I'm like, dude, I'd love to. I just can't because nobody in Canada cares about the Florida Panthers. That's just a fact, right? Well, some, but not all. There are some Panthers and Lightning podcasts, but they're Canadian hosted. We wanted to do one down here for the people here.
I remember specifically growing up in Canada, guys like Jay Bouwmeester were playing down here that got drafted young and whatever. And we were just like, how come we don't ever hear about these guys?
Yeah.
But for our Floridian listeners, if you will, if you're in Canada, you're really only ensconced in the team that you pull for. There's not a lot of information out there about the Panthers or the LA Kings or whatever it happens to be.
That's the point. It was not a criticism of the Florida Panthers that people in Canada don't care about them, but you're right. They care about the 7 teams in Canada and maybe the odd, the original 6 teams, right? And Connor Bedard's in Chicago and Rangers fans in New York. But anyways, it's the Panthers and the Lightning. Now, for the purpose of this, it's kind of funny that the Lightning bolt's over my shoulder and the Panthers logo is over yours because I'm going to kind of take the Florida side of things, the Panthers side of things, and I think you're going to kind of take the Lightning side of things over this. We'll see how it goes.
The only way that this works really well between the two of us is if we battle. That seems to be the most entertaining way to do it.
You enjoy it? I don't. And that says a lot about you, I think.
Is that right? I don't know what it says, but here we are.
No. You enjoy the battling, and the audience really seems to like when we fight over hockey. I think they need to understand that when we walk out that door, we forget about it. Or should I let that cat out of the bag?
I would say probably as soon as the mic turns off, we forget about it. We just go on our merry way.
We don't, we agree on everything except hockey. That's the one thing people need to understand.
Which is the one thing that we care about the most.
Maybe that's why. I don't know. But so I've written down for our inaugural edition of the Cats and Bolts podcast, and thanks for tuning in, everybody, by the way, 5 burning questions. So just before we look ahead, and we're going to be going to the Prospects Tournament this weekend in Estero, prospects of the Lightning and Panthers are going to play. We got to look back, and I would say who had the better season last year? Kind of a rhetorical question because we know the Panthers went to the Stanley Cup and the Lightning lost in round 1, but they were pretty close in the regular season.
Listen, here's the thing. In my opinion, I would rather have had the season that the Lightning had than the season that the Panthers have. And let me tell you why. The Lightning have depth. You know, if you look at the Oilers, they lost in the second round, but they lost to a very strong Vegas Golden Knights team. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not any better or whatever it happens to be. People were saying during that Vegas-Edmonton series that should have been the final. And Florida, let's be honest, they weren't even close to the best team that came out of the East. They did a great job getting there, but I'd rather be a Lightning fan than a Panthers fan looking back at last year heading into this year.
This is going to be a lot better because I don't like to argue with you on my television show, but I got no problem here, sister. And you thought it was a fluke that the Florida Panthers got to the Stanley Cup final last year. I don't believe in flukes. You actually believe that. said that.
There were so many different things that had to play out that got the Panthers to the final. It wasn't like they deserved, really, let's be honest, to win any of the series that they won. Yeah, they beat Carolina very handedly, but give or take, you play that series again with a strong Carolina team, how's it going to look? And what happened was it was proven that the Panthers just weren't strong enough when they came up against Vegas. Vegas was the first team that really played their best potential against the Panthers.
Fair, but you're not going to go back and play that series again against Carolina. And it was a sweep, by the way. So that tells me that it was not close, right? People, you need to understand that when we leave this studio, we won't be arguing like
hot.
this.
It's getting hot already.
Yeah, well, I can tell by the look in your eye. And I'm like, you seriously upset that I say that? Because I don't think it can be a fluke to get to a championship final. That's the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. Things need to go your way. Guess what? Things went the Vegas Golden Knights' way, too.
Yeah, but Vegas was a strong team. Things just didn't just go their way. They were the best team in the playoffs. I don't want to say Vegas was the best team in the regular season. They weren't. They had a really strong playoffs. Everything clicked for them, but you could see Florida scrambling in the final.
Of course, but I think if you ask any Lightning player or fan or any Panthers player or fan who had the better season last year, they're going to say the Panthers because they went to the Stanley Cup final. You're saying it's the Lightning because they had a more solid season.
If you have to look back and compare what's going to happen this year, like who had the better overall season, sure, there's a lot of arguments. They got to the final.
It's perspective and how you look at it. But let's remember the year before that, the Panthers won the President's Trophy, and the Lightning knocked them out in round 2 in a 7-game series. And I would say Tampa had the better season because they played longer. That's pretty simple, isn't it?
Right. But Tampa at one point were the President's Trophy winners, and they got knocked out and swept in the first round. So did they have a better season? Just because one team gets one round further in the playoffs or something like that, it doesn't mean that they had a better season.
Mm-hmm. So we're saying, not that we've just come to this conclusion today, but you do not want to win the President's Trophy.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees with that. Nobody wants to win the President's Trophy anymore.
It's the curse. So to the second burning question, who will have a better season this year? The Lightning or the Panthers. But big news came out of the weekend. As you know, I was at the autograph signing and photo op session with Matthew Tkachuk. He looked fine taking photos with 2,700 Panthers fans. I think there was more people there than Chucky figured would be there. He looked fine, and then news came out this week that he's 100% ready to go from, I think it was a broken sternum in the Stanley Cup final. That's big news for Panthers fans. So anyways, to who will have a better season this year, I'm going to say Florida, and let me guess, you will say Tampa.
100%.
It's not 100%.
Absolutely. I 100% feel, sorry, let me clarify. I 100% feel very strongly that Tampa will have a stronger season. They're getting to that point where something's going to happen soon. Are they done winning Stanley Cups? Yeah. You can't carry on like that because eventually your guys get older. Tampa themselves heading into this month was $7 million over their cap space. That's something has to change, right? Are they going to move anybody big? I doubt it. They're going to figure out what they can do, but I just think that Tampa has the depth that Florida doesn't have, and that's why I think Tampa's going to have a stronger season.
I say Florida, and I'm actually really happy to see that Matthew Tkachuk is healthy to start the season because I didn't think he would be. They've got Alexander Barkov signed to an extension, to the long-term contract last year. They've got Sergei Bobrovsky locked up long-term. They got Chucky and I think 7 more seasons. And I think this will be a great season for them, too. By the way, the NHL.com rankings, power rankings had, I think, Tampa 7, Florida 8. So they're really close. They're really, really close, which also, by the way, is a fantastic thing for this show and NHL hockey in Florida. Now, speaking of, thank you to the Dodge family for the Lightning license plate over your shoulder. That thing was actually in use at one time. I'm not sure why it's not anymore, but I thank the family for loaning it to us for the purposes of the Cats and Bolts podcast, which, by the way, we should give them a shout out. Blake was very excited that we're doing a show about the Panthers and Lightning.
Well, Blake's 14, and the fact that Rod asked him his opinion on the Lightning before we started even talking about it. And
Yeah.
Blake was dialed in.
And I can't. Oh yeah, I said, hey, I know that this isn't all on video, but some is. I said to Blake just on the weekend, so how closely are you following the Lightning offseason? He's like, very closely. So they've replaced their fourth line, and Hedman's had his worst season as a pro, but Sarina thinks they're going to be better than the Panthers. So I'll leave that there. And then over my shoulder, thank you to the Florida Panthers for the Alexander Barkov bobblehead. I was there the night that they gave them away, so thank you, Barky. And that is, they sell ice cream in that Goldie mask, by the way. Maybe, no, you wouldn't know that because you don't eat ice cream.
I do sometimes eat ice cream, but is it an omen that Barkov's head fell off in the car before we got here?
It always falls off. Barkov's always losing his mind. Do you want to see it? His head's always falling off the bobblehead. So anyways, we've answered that question. As we fly through our burning 5 questions of the Lightning and Panthers as we go into this brand new season, who's got the better coach, babe?
Wow.
Tampa Bay's John Cooper or Florida's Paul Maurice?
I would have to obviously say John Cooper. I mean, what he has done for the Lightning speaks for itself, but don't underestimate Paul Maurice. The only thing with Paul Maurice, I love Paul Maurice as a coach, but he just doesn't have that win. Like there's just something missing there. Not saying he can't win with the Panthers. It all has to come together, and I think John Cooper had the perfect concoction to make the perfect cocktail. And it'll just depend. I think if Maurice has a little bit more time, maybe it will come out.
History will show that it's John Cooper. He's got 2 Stanley Cups, so I get it. And he also is in the same class as my brother at Notre Dame, so college. So I'll go John Cooper until Paul Maurice wins something. You've lived in Florida longer than me. Tell me what it is about Americans that when they hired Paul Maurice, I saw Panthers fans saying on social media, and they said to me at the gym, what's with this Paul Maurice guy? He's never won anything. Why would we want him?
Well, the same way that in Canada, nobody really watched the Panthers because it's not that people don't want to watch hockey. We just don't have the loyalties to the Panthers. But down here, they don't have access to watch hockey like we do in Canada. So why would somebody down here watch the Winnipeg Jets?
But he coached the Leafs and the Carolina Hurricanes as well, and Hartford Whalers. It's not like he was out of nowhere.
But they're not. This is why we're doing this podcast, because there's just a lot of information that's waiting for people because no one has access to figure these things out. They don't know why they hired Paul Maurice. They have no idea. Well, we're here to tell them all these things.
Or at least our opinion. She's got a few. But my point is simply this thing about Maurice. I think it's just an American mentality. If you didn't win, you're junk, like a championship. Because Maurice coached 1,000 games and won like 600 or 700. He's one of the winningest coaches in NHL history, but because he's not on the Stanley Cup, his name, he's junk.
Well, it's a different mentality.
I don't go along with that.
It's a different mentality here. If you look at college football, you have a lot of guys that have won a lot of different things. So everybody knows who Nick Saban is. Everybody knows who, whoever is, Urban Meyer, whatever. But they just are not absorbed in the Canadian teams or really in hockey anywhere other than the Panthers. You know what? Panthers fans, they have a lot of fans. They have a lot of good fans, but they're Panthers fans. They're not hockey fans. And that's the difference between people in Florida and people in Canada. They like their team. They're NHL fans, but they're not necessarily hockey fans. They probably couldn't name 2 junior hockey teams in Canada. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not because they don't like it. It's just because they don't have the exposure.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Well, yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's just the way it is.
It's kind of the way football fans are in Canada. Fact. Now, what might be a tougher question, my 4th burning question. Who's the better goalie? Andrei Vasilevsky in Tampa Bay or Bob, my guy Sergei Bobrovsky, the Florida Panthers? It is not an easy answer. I don't think anyways.
For me personally, I just don't feel like Bobrovsky is solid. He never has been. He got the Panthers where they went this past year. There's no question. Everybody agrees with that. But a guy like Vasilevsky has been steady the whole time. He's steadily good. And I'm going to have to give the edge to Vasilevsky because he's a proven goaltender. Bobrovsky's not.
Well, I guess it depends on, again, your definition of who's better. Like, they both potentially are going to the Hall of Fame. Like Vasilevsky probably is. You win 2 Stanley Cups as a goaltender, you're going to the Hall of Fame. Ask Mike Vernon. He just went in. I mean, he did it with 2 different teams. But with Bobrovsky, he's won 2 Vezinas, which is now, and taken a team to the Stanley Cup final. Sarina, that's almost a Hall of Fame resume.
Potentially. But I mean, if they let Mike Vernon in the Hall of Fame, they'll let anybody in the Hall of Fame.
Don't be like that.
I'm just giving you the ribs because you're a goaltender.
I'm glad that you clarified that.
Yes. Yeah. Mike Vernon, okay, for the people listening, probably have no idea who Mike Vernon is. He was a goaltender for the Calgary Flames, and that's all you need to know. Growing up an Oilers fan, not a fan of the Flames, never will support him, so that's why I had to give you the ribs a little bit.
Yeah, but I guess the question is, when I say who's the better goalie, you're not looking at resumes. You're saying we have 1 game, 7 to win. Who do you want in goal? Vasilevsky or Bob?
Vasilevsky, 100%. Bobrovsky is too inconsistent. If you're playing in the NFL, you get 1 chance. Who would you rather have as your quarterback? Tom Brady or, well, I guess can't say Aaron Rodgers now, but Tom
That's
Brady.
an easy one.
Tom Brady has proven time and time again that he will come back in the big game. So you're going to pick a Tom Brady because he's proven. Yes, you're right. It's in the now. You can't look at the past and say, well, this guy was really good here, but I take a safe bet. That's just me.
Well, it's interesting now because the talk in the playoffs last year, especially when the Lightning got down on their way to losing to Toronto in 6 games in round 1, was that Vasilevsky's not the goalie he used to be. And they're also saying Hedman's not the defenseman he used to be. The numbers bear that all out, right?
Yes. Well, you got to look at a guy like Hedman. This is what I don't think people just don't understand about the human body itself. Hedman is a large human being, and it takes a lot more kinetic energy for him to physically move that body. That's a fact. So Hedman's gotten a lot slower. There's only so much gas in the tank. Hedman just needs more recovery time, and I think they really realized this year that it was starting to catch up to him. It's not, he's a fantastic defenseman, one of the best, but this year, I would agree, this year is not one of his best.
My 5th and final burning question, and then we're going to wrap up this inaugural podcast and let everybody go back and probably listen to it again because they loved it that much. And I will just tell you that it's a different era. Man, it's 2023. So if you have questions moving forward, just DM them to us in between shows, right? You don't need to have a text line. We don't need to have a Facebook page and comment on there. Just DM us with topics that you'd like us to discuss, and it makes that a lot easier on me. Trust me, not having to come up with these 5 questions. But my last one is, how big can the NHL get in Florida? Because, again, you've been here longer than me. I love the vibe. And to be honest, when I first came here a couple of years ago, I was surprised to see as much Panthers gear and Lightning gear as I do see. I didn't think there'd be as much as there is.
I guess, how big could it get? Everything has a cap, right? And the reason I say is this, and hear me out. I lived in Southern California for 10 years. When the Kings won the Stanley Cup, when the Ducks won the Stanley Cup first and then the Kings won the Stanley Cup, everybody thought hockey's growing here, hockey's big here, hockey's big here. I'm like, the term hockey is big is relative. You and I are from Canada where everyone plays hockey. Hockey's not big in California, and it's not big here. Florida can hold a lot of professional sports teams. There are a lot of professional sports teams in this state. But at the end of the day, hockey is like so niched down here. Everybody plays football here.
Yeah.
A lot of people play baseball. It's just the way it is. It's territorial like that. So how big can the NHL get here? I mean, I think it's where it's going to be. I think that we watched the stands fill up in Tampa after they won their first Stanley Cup. The stands got busier. Now they're sold out, all the games.
Yeah.
And the Panthers aren't. But this year they probably will be because of the run that they made to the final.
People like to support a winner, right? And I don't know if people in South Florida want or care what people thought about their team when the rink was empty. There was 2,500 people at the games. That wasn't that long ago.
This past year, last year, or whatever you want to call it.
I don't know if they dipped below
like
5,000, but they were still 24th in attendance, which to me isn't bad. They outdrew Ottawa and Winnipeg last year. That's 2 Canadian markets.
This is a big rink here.
19.5.
So they had the highest attendance in Sunrise in the entire playoffs because they can hold more
Of the
people.
NHL teams?
Yes. The Panthers had the highest attendance average per game, right? Because it's a bigger rink.
Yeah.
So the rink in Winnipeg is smaller. Yes, Winnipeg didn't sell out their games, but, you know.
This was regular season.
No, I know. But even this past year, not this past year, but the year before, I mean, the stands weren't full here. There weren't a lot of people going to games. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's because they don't like the Panthers. People were still coming out of COVID. People were still recovering financially. And that puts a big hit on what you're willing to spend your money on.
Mm-hmm. Well, the one thing that we've talked about multiple times is who are these people in the Stanley Cup final going to the games? Because I didn't see them all year. For the last 2 years, I've gone to, well, last year I probably went to 30 home games. There was people, the deeper the Panthers went into the playoffs, I've never seen before. And you paid $1,200 for that ticket.
Well,
you know,
that was my thing when we both went to an individual Stanley Cup game. He went to game 3 and I went to game 4 in the press box, so you can oversee everything. And I remember thinking to myself, these people never came all year, clearly, because the rink wasn't packed all year, and now they're willing to pay this much money to go to the Stanley Cup. So it's there. That's what I'm saying. I'm not judging. I'm saying that people are willing to pay to go watch hockey.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll see what happens this year because you said the Lightning are sold out every game. I'm interested to see what the Panthers are going to do in the regular season and how good of a year they're going to have. But you know what? We've answered all 5 of my burning questions. So unless you have anything else to say.
Well, I think there's always fun stuff to talk about injury-wise, salary cap-wise. I mean, speaking of Hedman, you know, when I was talking earlier about Tampa being $7 million over the salary cap, everybody's going, what are they going to do? You know, they have Zach Bogosian. He's only raking in $850,000, but they're like, well, if this is somebody we can move, he's as a defenseman. They've got 2 defensemen coming up, one of them being Hayden Fleury. But other than that, the well's dry. So you have guys like Hedman who are making $8+ million a year. You got Stamkos who's in the final year of his contract. So they're not going to trade Stamkos. I mean, if they pull a Jonathan Quick on him, I'll be so disappointed. You just don't do that to your career guy.
They wouldn't do that to the captain.
No, I wouldn't think so. But we saw the Kings do it to Quick. So who knows? But salary cap is always a huge thing that plays into effect. And
it's a dirty business. But, you know, I asked the question, who will have a better season? And I think it's Florida because I think they're a team on the rise. You think Tampa's on a team on the decline.
I do. And we've had that conversation multiple times. You can't climb. Look at Pittsburgh. They won a couple Stanley Cups, and they still have Crosby, Malkin, blah, blah.
They added to it. Erik Karlsson now.
Yeah, they're not climbing. Like you can't always build. You have to go into a rebuild every once in a while. And again, I think that's the biggest concern for Tampa is the well's dry. They don't have a lot of prospects coming up. So they're probably looking at it going, we got one more kick at the can, maybe 2 at best with these guys. And then we got to make a change.
You want to, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad do you want to get up to Tampa for a game this year?
That's a great question. I mean,
that's
10,
what I do.
like,
I'm the questions guy.
I would say a 10. I mean, why wouldn't we want to go? I've never been to a game there. From what I understand, they used to have a Tim Hortons in that rink, and they don't anymore. That's a little disappointing.
Well, yeah, then we got to plan when that's going to be. I look at the home schedule here, 3 games that I'm looking forward to the most. October 7th, home opener.
I know why that is.
Florida Panthers, Tampa Bay Lightning here. Who wins?
Florida.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Based on
They're
what?
going to be buzzing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emotion.
Florida they just have this thing against Tampa. They have a hard time beating Tampa. They're snake bitten that way. But a guy like Matthew Tkachuk, and we talked about this, I think it was with Bill Lindsay, talking about Matthew Tkachuk and how just of a different fit it is for him here. Playing in Calgary was one thing. There's a lot of pressure there. There's a lot of different things. But sometimes it's about how well you click with guys in the dressing room, just like the coaching staff. How well do you click with your guys? But I think Tkachuk he found his groove very quickly here, and I think he's going to thrive off of that.
November 12th, the Chicago Blackhawks and the Holy Child Connor Bedard come to Sunrise?
Can't wait for that podcast.
What? How many goals? How many dozen goals will Bedard have by November 12th? When
For those of you guys who don't know, Rod and I have had it out on the air over the last couple of years about our feelings about Connor Bedard, because we have two completely different feelings about it. I don't believe he's going to come out as hot as everybody thinks he is. He's small. He's not super fast. He's extremely skilled. I mean, nobody at his age holds that skill level, not even close. But this is a different game. This is a different game coming into the NHL. You put him up against some of those big defensemen, like Hedman, probably weighs twice as much.
Yeah. Well, we're going to find out. He's got a long career to figure it out. And I've got him as a point a game. That's my prediction. 82 games, 82 points. A point a game, however many games he plays. McDavid and Crosby did that. So. Yeah.
You know, McDavid, Crosby came out a rookie as a great rookie. He came out great. And wasn't that the year there was the strike or the lockout?
Crosby, yes.
Yeah. So Crosby came out really well as a rookie. He was a great rookie. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan, but I'll give that guy credit. He just held it steady. He was a good leader. He's been a great leader for his team. He's right where he needs to be, in my opinion. Bedard's a little smaller, and he's not McDavid. But what they're going to do is they're going to throw him on the power play with Taylor Hall and whoever else, and that kid is just, he's so skilled that his wrist shot is unbelievable. He'll snipe a few, but I don't think he's going to be a point a game.
December 23rd, the Stanley Cup champion Vegas Golden Knights come to town.
Oh.
We got to be in the barn for that one.
Well, that'll be fantastic. I mean,
see your buddy Krim.
Yeah, that's a fun story. So I'm at the Stanley Cup. Well, let's talk about that whole beautiful day for me. Being at Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Finals, I was able to, first and foremost, the most important part of my life was that I met Wayne Gretzky that day. So that was very pleasing for me. I met Mark Messier. I met all these cool guys.
I might send a picture of that to our producer, Ben, so he can throw it up.
So,
how would you like it, Ben?
It's fantastic.
Through airdrop.
Through airdrop?
So,
okay.
Meeting Mark Messier, meeting all these guys, talking with these hockey people, even meeting some of my broadcast idols. I mean, it was just amazing being in the rink there. And the one thing I will say, everybody talked about how cold the rink is here. I'm like, yeah, the rink is freezing. Like even Mark Messier was wearing like a sweat, like jumpsuit, like a sweat outfit. I'm like, it's freezing in this rink. But I have a retro leather Oilers jacket. And Krim came up to me and
Kelly McCrimmon, the general manager of the Vegas Golden Knights.
He came up and he's like, what? I got to ask, what's with the Oiler jacket? He goes, why the Oiler jacket? Why not? I go, it's always Oiler time. He didn't know what to say, but he agreed. But I did tell him that I felt like Vegas was going to potentially win that series very quickly.
Yeah. It was a 5-game series, and the only game that Vegas lost was the game that I was at, which is what it is. You let me know, Ben, when you got the photo. Sounds like he's got it there. He's going to throw it up on the screen right now.
Look at that.
There it is.
Look at that beauty.
He's about the same age as your dad. Ish.
He's a little younger than my dad.
Yeah. Anything you want to say? How did he smell?
Well, he didn't. I couldn't really smell him. I was too busy trying.
All your senses were overloaded. I
was trying to stand up, let alone smell anything. He was going back and forth between rooms for makeup, and when I first passed by and I saw him, and I just stopped dead, and I remember putting my hand in my chest, like, what was that? And his security guy was like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And I couldn't even form a sentence. He knew something was up. And so I was kind of hanging around. I was like, I can't leave this. Wayne is here. He's right there. And so I was waiting, and the security guy asked me if there was anything he could help me with. And I said, actually, you can. It's been my lifelong dream to meet the Great One. And that's all I need from you. And he's like, all right, hold tight and I'll make it happen. And it was by far the greatest moment of my entire life.
Okay. Well, I'm going to wind this up on this. So we've covered a lot and we got to save it for future shows. We've talked about the games coming up and blah, blah, blah. But this weekend we'll be in Estero, Florida. We should talk about that. You're welcome, Panthers and Lightning, that will promote this for you at Hertz Arena. We've driven by it, never been inside it, so I'm excited for that. And Hurricanes and Predators rookies will be here too for the Prospects Tournament. It's the NHL Southeastern Showcase, and it's free to attend. And I'm excited because a family friend of mine, Jaden DeRose, playing for the Tampa Bay Lightning Prospects, and it's been nice to be in the building watching hockey.
It's going to be amazing. There's 2 games on Saturday that we're going to. All the 4 teams involved are Carolina, Nashville, Tampa, and Florida. And there are players on that team. It's not necessarily just guys who were drafted this past year. There was guys who was drafted a few years ago. There are some other guys were invitees that were not signed on their current team. What we won't see are any of the NCAA players. If they go according to NCAA rules, they have to pay their own way. They are not allowed to have the team pay for that. So we're not really, and they're not allowed to miss class. So we're not going to see any of those guys. But what a great weekend of hockey it'll be.
NCAA hurting their athletes. Again, a topic for another time. Again, follow us on Twitter and Facebook, everybody. Cats and Bolts Podcast. You got any questions or comments for upcoming shows, let us know. And we're out of here. We'll see you next week from Podcast Junkie Studios and the Cats and Bolts Podcast.